Company policy. That's what Davies barked. But I didn't give a damn. Not tonight. Chloe was already crying, and the steak, a perfect filet mignon, was headed for the trash. $80 wasted. My feet throbbed. Lily's meds flashed in my mind. Waste. It was all waste. Then he walked in. Frayed coat, haunted eyes. Tiffany practically sneered him away. He just wanted soup. That's when I snapped. Grabbed a takeout box. Shoved the steak inside. Risky? Beyond. But watching him walk away, that box clutched tight. They have no idea how her quiet kindness will change everything. Not a clue. Company policy. That's what Davies barked. But I didn't give a damn. Not tonight. Chloe was already crying, and the steak, a perfect filet mignon, was headed for the trash. $80 wasted. My feet throbbed. Lily's meds flashed in my mind. Waste. It was all waste. Then he walked in. Frayed coat, haunted eyes. Tiffany practically sneered him away. He just wanted soup. That's when I snapped. Grabbed a takeout box. Shoved the steak inside. Risky? Beyond. But watching him walk away, that box clutched tight. They have no idea how her quiet kindness will change everything. Not a clue. It always started like this, didn't it? With some flicker of injustice, some slow burn of anger that finally ignited. But this time, it was more than just the usual daily grind at the Gilded Spoon. 16 hours. That's how long Clara had been on her feet, navigating the treacherous waters of entitled patrons and the ever-watchful eye of Mr. Davies, a man whose soul seemed permanently pickled in vinegar. The Gilded Spoon wasn't just a restaurant, it was a performance. And Clara, she was the star of the show, forced to smile and dance for an audience that often treated her like a ghost. "Excuse me, Miss the words dripping with disdain sliced through the humid air of the dining room. Table 7. Diamond-encrusted fingers tapped impatiently on the tablecloth. Clara plastered on her most dazzling smile. "How is everything this evening, madam?" she asked, the sweetness a carefully crafted facade. "The risotto," the woman declared, prodding the creamy rice with her fork as if conducting an autopsy. "It's tepid." Tepid? Impossible. Clara's mind reeled. Chef Antoine, a culinary tyrant with a penchant for profanity, had personally overseen the dish. It had left the kitchen mere minutes ago, practically radiating heat. But at the Gilded Spoon, logic held no sway against the whims of the wealthy. "I am so incredibly sorry, madam. I will have Chef Antoine prepare a fresh one immediately." A dismissive wave. "Don't bother. My appetite is ruined. Just take it off the bill." Of course, $80 worth of perfectly good risotto, destined for the organic waste bin. As she carried the plate toward the kitchen, the familiar ache in her feet intensified. Each step was a reminder of the bills piling up on her kitchen counter, of Lily's weakening condition, of the endless sacrifices she made to keep them afloat. Lily, her younger sister's face, pale and fragile, swam into Clara's vision. The specialist's latest report, a stark declaration of the astronomical cost of Lily's medication, was seared into her memory. Each month was a desperate scramble, a balancing act on a razor's edge. She'd pick up extra shifts, tolerate Davies' sour moods, and wear a smile that felt more like a grimace. Davies. Just the thought of him sent a shiver down her spine. He patrolled the dining room like a hawk, his eyes constantly scanning for the slightest infraction. Protecting the brand's assets, from the silverware to the leftover bread, was his mantra, and company policy was his weapon of choice. It was drilled into them. All leftover food went straight into the sealed bins. No exceptions. Taking anything meant instant dismissal, potential legal action for theft. The risotto scraped into the bin. That gnawing feeling ate at Clara again. The waste. The sheer, unadulterated waste. Enough food to feed a family for a week, tossed away without a second thought. Her shift was nearly over when he arrived. He was an anomaly, a jarring note in the symphony of excess that was the Gilded Spoon. Frayed coat, damp hair, a weariness etched into every line of his face. Tiffany, the hostess with the vacant stare and the nose ring, barely glanced at him before delivering her practiced dismissal. "The kitchen is closing." It wasn't true. They served the bar menu until 11:30. He didn't argue, just nodded and shuffled toward the smallest, most secluded table in the corner, usually reserved for awkward first dates or rejected proposals. Clara Ara watched as the other waitresses actively avoided him. He wasn't a big spender. He was tap water and maybe soup. He was a waste of their time. But Clara Ara couldn't ignore him. Her feet screamed in protest, but her conscience wouldn't allow it. She grabbed a menu and a water glass and approached his table. "Welcome to the Gilded Spoon," she said, her voice softening instinctively. "My name is Clara Ara. Can I get you started with something to drink?" He looked up, and his eyes, a startling shade of blue, met hers. They were intelligent, intense, assessing. He looked quickly away. "Just water, thank you," he rasped, his voice rough around the edges. He scanned the menu, his expression unreadable. He looked like he hadn't eaten a decent meal in weeks. Yet there was a quiet dignity about him, a stillness that belied his disheveled appearance. "Take your time," Clara Ara said, offering a small, genuine smile. He ordered the potato leek soup, the cheapest item on the menu, and nursed it for nearly an hour. Clara Ara refilled his water glass 3 times without him asking, treating him with the same respect she would have shown a celebrity. And all the while she felt his eyes on her, a silent, unwavering observation that she couldn't quite decipher. The clock crept past midnight. The last of the diners drifted away, leaving behind a trail of half-empty wine glasses and crumpled napkins. The staff moved with weary efficiency, clearing tables and wiping down surfaces. Then Davy's voice boomed, "Evans, table 4 needs resetting. Peterson, that spill by the bar. The Croft regional director's in town. I want this place spotless." That's when it happened. A commotion erupted from the kitchen, Chef Antoine bellowing in a bizarre hybrid of French and English. A young waitress, Chloe, stumbled out, her face pale and tear-streaked. I punched in the wrong order," she stammered. "Table 9 wanted the sea bass, but I wrote down the filet mignon. They sent it back. He's going to kill me." Davies descended upon her like a thundercloud. "You did what? Do you have any idea what a 9-ounce filet costs us? That's $120 on the menu, Chloe. Incompetent." Clara Ara saw the rejected steak on the pass-through counter, a perfectly cooked medium-rare filet mignon, nestled beside a mound of garlic mashed potatoes and asparagus spears with a hollandaise drizzle, untouched. "Throw it out," Davies snapped at a busboy. "And Chloe, this is coming out of your paycheck." Chloe choked back a sob. Clara Ara knew it was an illegal threat, but Chloe was young, scared. A wave of anger surged through Clara Ara. She glanced at the steak, a meal that cost more than she earned in a day. And then her eyes drifted to the man in the corner, the man who had only ordered a bowl of soup. A reckless, dangerous idea sparked in her mind. It was a clear violation of company policy, something that would get her fired on the spot. But then Lily's face, weak and pale, flashed into her thoughts. Lily, who barely touched the canned soup and crackers that Clara had left for her that morning. The wastefulness of it all crashed over Clara, overwhelming her. This steak was more than food. It was a symbol of the unfairness that seemed to govern her life. It wasn't just about the man in the corner anymore. It was about Lily. It was a small act of defiance against a world that seemed determined to grind her down. She waited. She waited until Davies was distracted, berating Chloe in his office. She waited until the busboy was busy in the back. Then, with her heart pounding, she walked to the pass-through counter. Her hands moved quickly, her waitress instincts kicking in. She grabbed a large black takeaway box, the kind reserved for VIP takeout orders. With practiced efficiency, she slid the entire meal into the container. The steak, the potatoes, the asparagus. She tucked in a plastic fork and knife wrapped in a fresh linen napkin. Holding the box low by her side, she shielded it from the security camera as she walked out of the kitchen. Every instinct screamed at her to stop, to put it back, to throw it in the trash where it belonged. This job, this soul-crushing, exhausting job, was the only thing keeping her and Lily afloat. But she kept walking. She approached the quiet man's table. He looked up, a flicker of curiosity in his blue eyes. He'd placed a $10 bill on the table for his $8 soup. "Your check, sir," she said, placing the bill folder on the table. Then, lowering her voice to a whisper, she placed the heavy takeaway box on the chair beside him, keeping it below table level. He looked from her to the box, a frown creasing his brow. "What is this?" "The kitchen made an error," she whispered, her words rushing out. "It's a filet mignon. It was going to be thrown away. I I hate seeing good food go to waste. Please, just take it. Don't say anything." His expression was unreadable. Not grateful, not relieved. Analytical. He stared at her, his gaze so intense it felt like he was peeling back her layers, exposing her vulnerabilities. The silence stretched, becoming unbearable. Clara Ara was convinced he was going to refuse, or worse, call Davies over and expose her. Finally, he gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. He didn't smile. He just picked up the box, the weight of it seeming to surprise him. He stood, his tall frame unfolding from the small chair. He was taller than she had realized. He paused beside her, so close she could feel a strange, cold energy radiating from him. "What is your name?" he asked, his voice low and gravelly. "Clara Ara," she said, her own voice barely audible. He nodded again, a short, sharp movement. "Clara Ara," he said her name as if he were memorizing it, filing it away for some future purpose. Without another word, he walked out of the restaurant and disappeared into the rainy night. Clara Ara let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding, her body trembling with a mixture of fear and a strange, exhilarating sense of righteousness. She had done it. She had broken the biggest rule. She glanced at the security camera, a small black dome in the ceiling, and felt a knot of dread tighten in her stomach. She had gotten away with it, or so she thought. The blissful oblivion of sleep lasted only 4 hours. Clara Ara woke up, not to her alarm, but to the pounding in her head and the gray light filtering in. At 7:15 a.m., the knock on the door was not the landlord or a courier. He was tall, thin, and severe, with silver hair combed back from a high forehead and eyes like chips of flint behind wire-rimmed glasses. His suit was a charcoal gray masterpiece of tailoring, and the briefcase in his left hand was made of rich, dark leather. The sight was jarring. Clara Ara Evans knew right then and there that this day was going to change her life forever. "Clara Ara Evans?" he asked, his voice clipped, precise and devoid of warmth. "Journey between worlds." They left behind the cracked pavement and graffiti-tagged walls of her neighborhood and glided into the steel and glass canyons of the financial district. Each block brought them closer to the heart of the power that was about to crush her. Finally, the car slowed and pulled up in front of a skyscraper that seemed to pierce the clouds. Etched in discreet, elegant letters above the towering glass doors were the words, "Croft Tower." This was the global headquarters, the nerve center of Julian Croft's empire. The driver led her through the lobby, a cavernous space of white marble and modern art. The air hummed with quiet, purposeful energy. Men and women in exquisitely tailored suits moved with an air of brisk importance. Their conversations a low murmur of billion-dollar deals and corporate strategy. Clara Ara, in her 5-year-old slacks, felt like a ghost, completely invisible and utterly out of place. They didn't stop at the main elevator bank. The driver led her to a private, unmarked door that opened with a key card. Inside was a single express elevator. He pressed the top button marked with a simple P for penthouse. The elevator ascended in unnerving silence, the numbers climbing at a dizzying speed. 10, 20, 40, 60, 75. Her ears popped with a soft chime. The doors slid open not into a hallway, but directly into an office. Or rather what passed for an office. It was a space larger than her entire apartment, with floor-to-ceiling windows on 3 sides offering a breathtaking godlike view of the entire city. The furniture was sparse and modern, a massive desk of polished black stone, a low-slung leather sofa, and shelves filled with what looked like museum-quality artifacts. It was the office of a king surveying his kingdom. And standing by the window, his back to her, was a man. He was tall, dressed in a perfectly fitted dark navy suit that bespoke immense wealth and power. He was staring down at the city below, his hands clasped behind his back. Arthur Vance, the lawyer, stood discreetly by the desk. "Miss Evans is here, sir." The man by the window turned around slowly, and Clara Ara's breath caught in her chest. The world tilted on its axis. The panic, the fear, the anxiety of the last 3 hours coalesced into a single sharp point of pure disbelieving shock. It was him. The hair was no longer damp and unkempt, but perfectly styled. The weary, defeated expression was gone, replaced by one of cold, calculating authority. The frayed coat had been swapped for a bespoke suit, but the face was the same, and the eyes were identical. Those startlingly clear, intelligent blue eyes that had watched her so intently from a corner table. The man from the restaurant, the man she had given the steak to, the man she had pitted, he was Julian Croft. For a moment, the only sound in the vast office was the frantic drumming of Clarara's own heart. The air seemed to crackle with the unspoken revelation. The disheveled down on his luck man was a costume. The entire encounter had been a charade. She hadn't been helping a stranger. She had been serving her own executioner in disguise. Julian Croft's face was an unreadable mask of stone. He took a step forward, his expensive shoes making no sound on the plush carpet. He stopped about 10 ft from her, his posture radiating an intimidating aura of absolute control. "Miss Evans," he said, and the voice was different. The rough, raspy quality was gone, replaced by a smooth, cultured baritone that dripped with command. "Thank you for coming." Clarara found her voice, though it came out as a strangled whisper. I believe we've met," he said, a flicker of something not humor, but a cold acknowledgement in his eyes, though under different circumstances. The confusion and fear that had plagued her all morning began to curdle into a hot, sickening feeling of betrayal. This wasn't just a corporate policy issue. This felt personal. He had set a trap, and she had walked right into it. Why, she asked the single word encompassing 1,000 questions. Why the disguise? Why the test? Why her? I make it a habit to understand my business from the ground up. "Ms. Evans," he explained, his tone clinical as if he were discussing a quarterly report. "From the boardroom to the scullery for the past month, I've been visiting my properties unannounced. I wanted to see the Croft Hospitality Group through the eyes of our customers, not through the filtered reports of my executives." He began to pace slowly, his hands now in his pockets. "I have been observing a disturbing trend. Shrinkage, inventory loss, theft. Small at first, but it adds up. A bottle of wine here, a case of prime beef there. It's a cancer, a rot. I came to the Gilded Spoon last night, looking for the source of that rot." He stopped and looked directly at her, his blue eyes pinning her in place. "And then I found you." The accusation hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. He hadn't seen an act of kindness. He had seen exactly what he was looking for, a thief. In his mind, she had been caught red-handed. She wasn't giving food to a homeless man. She was a thieving employee smuggling stolen goods out the back door to a waiting accomplice. The thought was so grotesquely wrong that a bubble of hysterical laughter almost escaped her. "You think I stole from you?" she said, her voice gaining a sliver of strength from sheer indignation. "I don't think, Miss Evans. I know." He counted, his voice hardening. "I have the video. I have the testimony of my own eyes. You took a prime asset, packaged it, and removed it from the premises in direct flagrant violation of company policy. You are the rot I was looking for." The sheer arrogance of the man was staggering. He sat in his glass tower, a world away from the reality of her life, and passed judgment like a god. All her fear, all her desperation suddenly ignited into white-hot anger, the anger of the powerless who have been pushed too far. "The rot," she repeated, her voice rising, shaking with a fury she hadn't known she possessed. "You want to talk about rot, Mr. Croft?" "Arthur," Vance took a half-step forward as if to intervene, but Julian Croft raised a hand to stop him. He seemed intrigued by her defiance. "Let me tell you about rot," Clarara continued, taking a step toward him, closing the distance. "Rot is an $80 plate of perfectly cooked risotto being scraped into a garbage can because a woman found it tepid. Rot is a terrified young waitress being threatened with having a $100 steak taken from her paycheck because she made a simple mistake. Rot is a policy that dictates that thousands of dollars of perfectly good food that could feed dozens of hungry people be thrown into a bin every single night while the people cooking and serving it can barely afford to buy groceries. She was breathing heavily, her heart pounding with adrenaline. She had nothing left to lose. He had already fired her. He was already suing her. What more could he do? That food was garbage, Mr. Croft. Your own manager ordered it thrown out. It was worthless. But I guess in your world, it's better for it to be garbage than for it to feed a man who looks like he needs it. Julian Croft's expression didn't change, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. He had expected tears begging excuses. He had not expected to be lectured on the morality of his own company policies. The policies are in place to prevent theft, he stated coldly, to prevent employees from manufacturing mistakes so they can get a free meal for themselves or their friends. It's a simple, necessary rule. And you thought I was taking it for myself? She asked, incredulous. Did I look like I was celebrating? Did the man I gave it to look like my friend? I saw a human being who looked hungry, and I saw a meal that was about to be wasted. And for 5 seconds, I chose to be a decent person instead of a good employee. And that is the rot you're so determined to cut out. Congratulations, Mr. Croft. You found it. I hope you're proud. She stood her ground, her chin held high, tears of anger and frustration stinging her eyes. She had laid the truth of her world at his feet, a stark, ugly contrast to the pristine perfection of his penthouse office. The silence that followed was absolute. She had said her piece. Now all she could do was wait for the hammer to fall. Julian Croft stared at her, and for the first time, his mask of cold authority seemed to crack. He wasn't looking at a thief anymore. He was looking at something else, something he hadn't anticipated and didn't quite understand. The defiant, desperate woman in front of him did not fit into the neat little box of dishonest employee he had put her in, and her raw, blistering honesty had just shattered the very foundation of his assumptions. Julian Croft was a man who traded in certainties. His empire was built on data, on predictable market trends, on the black and white logic of profit and loss. He understood balance sheets, not bleeding hearts. For the past decade, a creeping cynicism had taken root in him. He'd been cheated by partners, lied to by executives, and stolen from by employees. He had come to believe that given the opportunity, most people would choose self-interest over integrity. Clara Ara Evans was supposed to be the proof, the final confirmation of his worldview, but she wasn't. Her impassioned speech echoed in the silent office. It wasn't a denial or an excuse. It was an indictment of him, his company, his entire world. He had come looking for a simple problem theft, and she had presented him with a complex moral one that he couldn't easily dismiss. He turned away from her and walked back to the window, looking down at the city. The cars below were like insects, the people insignificant specks. It was a view that usually made him feel powerful. Today it made him feel disconnected. Why did you do it? Miss Evans? He asked, his back still to her. His voice was quieter now, stripped of its earlier accusatory edge. It wasn't just about the waste. I saw your face. You risked your job. A job I can only assume you need. Why? For a complete stranger. Clara Ara's anger began to subside, replaced by a deep, weary sadness. The adrenaline was gone, leaving her feeling hollowed out. Because I know what it's like to be hungry, she said. Simply the truth of it, raw and unadorned. I know what it's like to have to choose between paying the rent and buying medicine. And I know that sometimes a small kindness from a stranger is the only thing that gets you through the day. This was the part she hadn't wanted to say, the part that felt like weakness, like begging for pity. But he had asked, and the truth was all she had left. I have a sister, she continued, her voice thick with emotion. Lily, she's sick. She has been for years. The medications, the doctors, it's a mountain of debt that I can never seem to climb. That job at your restaurant, those double shifts, that was the only thing keeping a roof over our heads. It was the only thing paying for the medicine that keeps my sister alive. So yes, I needed that job. I needed it more than you can possibly imagine. She swiped at a tear trailing down her cheek. But when I saw you, when I saw that man sitting there looking so lost, and I saw that perfectly good food about to be thrown away, I thought about what that meal would mean to someone who had nothing. It was more than food. It was a little bit of dignity, a sign that someone sees them. I guess I just decided that Lily would want me to choose kindness. even if it was stupid, even if it meant risking everything. Julian remained silent, his posture rigid. Every word she spoke was a chisel chipping away at the cynical armor he had built around himself. He had spent his life accumulating wealth and power, insulating himself from the very struggles she described. He had created policies designed to protect his assets, never once considering the human cost of such rigid, unfilling rules. His undercover mission was predicated on the idea that his employees were the problem. He was beginning to realize that the problem might be him. He thought of his own sister, Catherine, who had died years ago. He had been a young man just starting his first company. He'd been so obsessed with success, so driven, that he had missed her last few months, always promising to visit next week, next month. He had all the money in the world now, but he couldn't buy back that time. Clara Ara's fierce devotion to her sister was a painful echo of his own failing. Finally, he turned to face her. The coldness in his eyes was gone, replaced by a complex, troubled expression. "Arthur," he said, his voice low. "Sir," the lawyer responded, "the background check I requested on Miss Evans this morning. The summary." Arthur Vance hesitated for a fraction of a second, then opened his briefcase and pulled out a single sheet of paper. Clara Ara Evans, age 26. He read in a neutral monotone. Sole legal guardian of her sister, Lily Evans, age 17. Lily was diagnosed 3 years ago with systemic lupus erythematosus with severe renal involvement. Current outstanding medical debt is approximately $112,000. Ms. Evans works an average of 65 hours per week. She has no criminal record, no prior history of disciplinary action at any place of employment. Her performance reviews at the Gilded Spoon have been consistently rated as excellent. The clinical facts confirmed everything Clara Ara had said. She wasn't a liar. She wasn't a thief. She was a desperate woman pushed to the edge who even then chose to help someone else. Julian Croft looked at Clara Ara, truly seeing her for the first time. Not as an employee, not as a suspect, but as a person of extraordinary character, forged in the fires of hardship. He had set out to find the worst in his company and had by complete accident found the very best. The rot he'd been so concerned about wasn't in his staff. It was in the corporate culture. He had created a culture that had lost its humanity. Arthur Julian set his voice firm with a newfound clarity. Tear up the termination notice and shred that civil complaint immediately. Arthur Vance looked surprised, but a small, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. He took the documents, tore them precisely in half, and then in half again, dropping the pieces into a nearby wastebasket. Clara Ara watched, stunned into silence. The lawsuit, the firing, it was all just gone, Miss Evans, Julian said, and her name sounded different now. It sounded like a name he respected. "I owe you an apology. My judgment was flawed. I was wrong. I was so focused on finding dishonesty that I failed to recognize integrity when it was staring me right in the face. The apology was simple, direct, and utterly sincere. It was the last thing Clara had ever expected to hear. What you did last night," he continued, "was not a fireable offense. In fact, it has highlighted a profound failure within my own organization, a failure of compassion." He walked to his desk and leaned against it. The picture of a man whose entire perspective had been forcibly shifted. "I'm not giving you your job back, Clara Ara," he said. Clara Ara's heart sank. For a moment she had dared to hope. "I'm offering you a new one," he finished, and the world tilted once more. Clara Ara stared at him, unable to process his words. A new job. After everything that had just happened, it felt like a dream, a strange, surreal twist in a day that had already been full of them. "I don't understand," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Julian Croft gestured to the chair in front of his desk. For the first time, he was inviting her to sit. Tentatively, she did, perching on the edge of the expensive leather. For years, Julian began, his voice thoughtful. "The Croft Foundation, my company's charitable arm, has been writing checks. We donate to hospitals, to arts programs, to disaster relief. It's good pay, and it helps with taxes. But it's impersonal, it's sterile, it lacks a soul." He looked at her, his blue eyes holding a new kind of intensity, not of suspicion, but of vision. You talked about waste, Clara, and you were right. My restaurants and hotels throw away metric tons of high-quality food every year across the country. We've always written it off as the cost of doing business, but it's not. It's a moral failure. And you, with your one box of leftover steak, you saw that more clearly than my entire board of directors. He leaned forward, his hands clasped on the Blackstone desk. I want to create a new initiative within the Croft Foundation, a program with a single clear mission to ensure that no usable food from any of my properties is ever thrown away again. I want it collected, packaged, and delivered to homeless shelters, food banks, and community centers in every city where we operate. I want to turn our single biggest source of waste into our single biggest source of charged charity. He paused, letting the weight of the idea settle in the room. But a program like that needs a leader. It needs someone who doesn't just understand logistics, but who understands the why. It needs someone with integrity, grit, and a deep innate sense of compassion. Someone who knows what it means to choose kindness, even when it's the harder choice. He looked directly at her. It needs you, Clara. I want you to run it. Clara was speechless. Her mind reeled him the billionaire CEO, offering her the fired waitress and executive position. It was impossible. May Mr. Kraft. I don't have a college degree. I don't have any corporate experience. I'm a waitress. You have a PhD in humanity, Miss Evans, which is a great deal more valuable for this role than an MBA. He countered swiftly. We can hire people for the logistics. I need you for the heart. I'll give you an office here in this building. I'll give you a team. I'll give you a budget that will make your head spin, and I'll give you a salary that ensures you never have to worry about your sister's medical bills ever again. As if on cue, Arthur Vance spoke up from his position by the door. On that note, Mr. Croft also instructed me to make arrangements with the Foundation's medical fund. All of Lily's current and future medical expenses will be covered in full. The breath left Clara's body in a rush. The weight she had been carrying on her shoulders for years, the crushing, suffocating mountain of debt and fear, simply evaporated. Tears streamed down her face now, but they were not tears of anger or sadness. They were tears of overwhelming, incomprehensible relief. The fight was over. Lily was safe. Why? She finally managed to ask, looking at Julian Croft. Why do all this for me? Julian's gaze drifted back to the window to the sprawling city below. Because you reminded me of something I had long forgotten, he said, his voice quiet and sincere. That the true value of a company isn't measured by its stock price, but by its impact on people's lives. You didn't just save a meal from being wasted last night, Clara. In a way, you saved me from my own cynicism. That's a debt worth repaying. A few months later, the view from the 70th floor of the Croft Tower was becoming familiar to Clara. She had her own office, smaller than Julian's, but with the same stunning view. Her desk was covered in spreadsheets and proposals for what they were now calling the Second Serving Initiative. She wore a sharp business suit, a gift from Julian, and spoke with a confidence that grew stronger each day. The program was a stunning success. In its first 3 months, it had redirected over 50 tons of food to those in need. News outlets had picked up the story, hailing the Croft Hospitality Group for its revolutionary approach to corporate responsibility. Mr. Davies, the sneering manager from the Gilded Spoon, had been reassigned to a remote hotel in Alaska after an internal review found his management style to be incompatible with the company's new compassionate ethos. Best of all, Lily was thriving with access to the best doctors and treatments without the stress of financial worry. The color had returned to her cheeks. She was even taking online college courses, dreaming of a future that had once seemed impossible. One evening, Clara was working late when Julian knocked on her open door. He wasn't her boss anymore. Not really. He had become a mentor, a partner, and surprisingly a friend. Still here? He asked with a small smile. Just finalizing the rollout for the Chicago branch, she said, leaning back in her chair. You've done incredible work, Clara, more than I ever could have imagined. I had a good reason to, she said, her gaze drifting to a framed photo on her desk. It was of her and a smiling, healthy-looking Lily. They stood in silence for a moment, looking out at the glittering lights of the city. Two people from two vastly different worlds, brought together by a plate of food in a simple act of kindness. Clara Ara thought back to that rainy night, to the fear and desperation she had felt. It was proof that you never know what a single moment of compassion can lead to, or whose life you might change. It could be the person you are helping, or as Julian Croft had learned, it could be your own. Clara Ara's story is a powerful reminder that our true character isn't defined by the job we have or the money in our bank account, but by the choices we make when no one is watching or when we think no one is watching. It shows that a single act of kindness, no matter how small or risky it seems, can create ripples that change not just one life, but the very culture of a multi-billion-dollar corporation. It's a testament to the idea that integrity and empathy are the most valuable assets any person can possess, far more precious than anything you can list on a balance sheet. Her journey from a struggling waitress to a force for positive change proves that the right action driven by the right intentions can open doors you never dreamed existed. If Clara's incredible story of compassion and unexpected triumph moved you, please take a moment to hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that kindness is never ever wasted. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next story about ordinary people caught in extraordinary circumstances. What did you think of Julian Croft's final decision? Let us know in the comments below.